Thank you for joining us today for another episode of Rebuilding the Black Family with your hosts, Carl Lewis and David Grant. Today on Rebuilding the Black Family, we'll be addressing the subject of black maternal health. And allow me first to refer you to a passage which speaks to the beauty of human creation. It's Psalms 139, 3 verses says this: "Even the darkness hides nothing from you, but the night shines as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to you. For you did form my inward parts. You did knit me together in my mother's womb. I will confess and praise you, for you are fearful and wonderful, and for the awful wonder of my birth. Wonderful are your works, and that my inner self knows right well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being formed in secret and intricately and curiously wrought, as if embroidered with various colors in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance, and in your book all the days of my life were written before ever they took shape, when as yet there was none of them." That's Psalms 139, verse 12 to 16. So David Grant is going to introduce us to our guest for today's program.
It's a pleasure to be here with an esteemed guest and also a good friend of mine, Priscilla Babwa. I'm going to read Priscilla's very nicely crafted bio. And of course, big her up at the end since she was my classmate in my master's program. So Priscilla is a perinatal social worker with a master's degree in social work. While in grad school, she wrote a research paper with a focus on the experiences of how Black immigrant women accessed maternal health services in the city of Toronto. She's currently working at Taibu Community Health Center, which is initially was supposed to be a Afrocentric or a Black-focused mental health or community health center, but has now been one that has just helped the greater Scarborough area in Toronto. And of course, Priscilla, correct me if I'm wrong. But she is currently working at Taibu Community Health Center with the Scarborough Perinatal Support Network. She's passionate about Black maternal health and hopes to bring more awareness to the challenges faced by Black women, parents, and the community during the perinatal period. And might I say, this is a woman who may appear to be reserved, may appear to be quiet, but she's brilliant. But she's very knowledgeable, and she's just such a kind and joyful person that I am so happy is here today with me to have a conversation about this very important topic. So thank you, Priscilla, for being here to speak with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Taibu is focused on the Black community, in the greater Toronto area.
Yeah.
And then helping anyone that does live in the Malvern area.
Okay.
So,
yeah, for sure. Okay, great. So I was on point.
Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. So we're going to be talking about Black maternal health today.
Yes.
Which is something that clearly you're passionate about. You've written about it. You work in it. And you continue, and you're still working in it. It's not like you've just only historically working. You're currently working in it.
Yeah.
So I have a couple questions I want to definitely... I want to pick your brain. I want to be able to have a discussion with this because I think our viewers, our listeners, there's probably a lot of questions about this that I don't think people may have had the opportunity to ask. I want to read a segment from an article just to really help set the tone. I'm going to pull it up right now. I have it even favorited. The article is called, for those who want to look at it on CBC, "Why Doctors Want Canada to Collect Better Data on Black Maternal Health." This was written in June 23rd, 2021. All right. Just to show how recent this is.
Yeah.
All right. So in general, and I'm just going to the section that I want to read. In general, there's not much data, you would say. Right, Priscilla? I mean, there's little to none on Black maternal.
There isn't.
Right?
Yeah. When I was writing my research paper, I had a really hard time finding research specific to the Canadian experience, like for Black women.
Yeah.
There's a lot more research in the States about that experience. So even like writing my paper, it was really hard.
Of course,
to write it, and then even to get participants for the paper, it was really hard. And so I'm not surprised that it continues to be that, and that this article was written.
Yeah.
To try to get more research, because it is important. Like, we can't create programs based on, I guess, this one size fits all.
From the American context. Yeah, exactly.
And so we need it from here, from the people who are trying to access healthcare here. And
Very good.
I think that's why we are probably having challenges to create programs and to have people try to access them, because we don't know their experiences, or they are sharing their experiences, but we're not really putting programs in because there's no research out there. So
no, very good. Man, you already started the conversation off nicely. We're gonna get right into it, because I have some questions, some follow up with that. So this section of the article is called "Invisible, Neglected, and Disrespected." So Toronto resident Kamitra Ashman, right? So this is again in the article, says she felt that she was ready to give birth earlier than 40 weeks of gestation, a time frame more common in white women, according to, I guess, previous research. But she said she was dismissed, even though Black women often have shorter gestation periods. She later ended up being induced. As she quotes, "I do not believe it would have ended in an emergency cesarean or C-section had they listened to me when I said at 37 weeks, my body feels right, my pelvis is opening up, what do I do? I was directed, oh, no, it's too early, go put your feet up." The emergency cesarean surgery left her with a keloid, a type of raised scar more common on black and dark skin, which can sometimes be avoided with the right surgical technique. I believe if their training had sensitized them to the unique needs of a Black woman's pregnancy, I feel the situation would have been avoided, she said. Instead, she faced 2 years of not having sensation and a raised scar that's very painful.
Wow.
When you hear... Let me actually pull up my questions as well, even though I feel like we're going to even have a conversation without that. When you hear this story, when you hear this this lady, Kamitri, and you hear about that, does it remind you of patients or clients that you've worked with? Is this things that you heard even when you researched, when you were talking to the different participants during that process? Or similar?
Hearing that, it does remind me of like experiences that I've heard where like Black women specifically aren't being heard in their experience, whether it's specific to like their mental health during a pregnancy or just their like physical pregnancy.
Yeah.
And so it's challenging because they're trying to advocate for their health, but they're not being heard. They're being dismissed. And so that's why I think a lot more Black women are seeking more representation in their care, because they're like, maybe if it's somebody that looks like me, then they'll understand when I say, I need this.
They'll have more care, they'll have more interest.
Or I like... there might be more of a connection because it might be somebody that represents me or that's in my community, because they'll be like, oh, if I'm in pain, then maybe that person will know that I am in pain.
Yeah.
Like,
So okay. And that's a very good point because I remember I was reading something. I was reading an article where they had, I don't know if it was an experiment or if it was just simply if it was just a focus group, but they had white resident physicians, right? I can't remember if they were trained to be OBGYNs or nonetheless, but they were white resident physicians. And it was that question about if, do Black women, I guess essentially who experiences more pain? Or has a higher pain threshold, I should say, Black woman or white woman, right? And, if when you're monitoring Black women's basically pain threshold, what would you look like, etc. Something I'm clearly probably misquoting it, but nonetheless, it was about understanding what is Black women's pain threshold. And the white resident physicians believed that Black women had higher pain thresholds and therefore were not as keen to answering their pain demands or requests. So these are white resident physicians. These are people training to be doctors, right? In their ignorance are believing this, as you said, myth, right? So then it clearly is a serious thing because that we're talking women's lives.
Yeah.
Right? If you're having a woman who's not having her health needs believed because, well, you know, like Henrietta Lacks, for instance, in the States, I think the black woman who was experimented on while she was living for to try to understand different remedies, quote unquote, for respective illnesses. She was tested on while she was alive because they thought, well, essentially, black people aren't human beings, and let alone the black woman, well, she can handle all that pain, right? This is where I guess some of those actions start to become justified.
Yeah.
So then that leads me into my next question. So in your experience, what have been the experience of the black mothers with whom you've worked? Like, what have they told you? You started talking about it a bit. What else have they told you about their experiences when they are pregnant, when they're preparing to give birth, things along those lines?
Just even like lack of support.
In what way? Support in
While you're pregnant, and then like afterwards, like in the postpartum stage.
Okay.
So
Period. Yeah.
postpartum period.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where postpartum depression can happen, postpartum anxiety.
I used to work with mothers who experience postpartum depression, correct?
Yeah, that's part of the program.
Oh, the perinatal is part of also adhering to the postpartum.
Yeah.
I see.
And
okay,
so,
that's good.
Having that lack of support or that lack of community is hard, because now you have to take care not only of yourself but of like a child, or if there's more children, like so that support is a big part of like taking care of your mental health and overall well-being.
Yes, of course.
And so I think that's definitely a common thing that I hear about, is just lack of support.
Yeah.
And doing things by yourself. And so
this is not just even before or after that you give birth. Would you say that lack of support is also present during their pregnancy?
Yeah.
Oh,
you start to see different relationships like just change. Whether it's family, whether it's friendships, whether it's like partners, like it changes.
Wow.
It's reflective of like sort of the society that we live in. It's very focused on the individual.
Very good.
Whereas like I think we come from communities that are about community.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
And so
exactly.
it's difficult to see that, because you see how like big of an impact that is on their mental health specifically.
Yeah, of course. The isolation.
Yeah, because now it's like, okay, now I have to juggle all these different things, and like my mental health gets put on the back burner.
It's not it doesn't become a priority per se,
because I have to do all these different things to take care of myself and my child.
Yes, of course.
And maybe other people in my life. And so just learning different things around like figuring out that the support part.
And I guess that's a big one.
Which is hard.
Yeah.
And then another one is just talking about postpartum depression, which I think is another one where within the Black community, I don't think we talk about a lot. It's postpartum depression.
Postpartum depression.
It's kind of that like hush.
Yep. No, exactly. It is that hush hush because, and correct me if I'm wrong, does it go back to that notion of the strong Black woman where, well, you just gave birth, and it's like, as much as we want to big you up that, wow, you just brought life into this world, Black women are so strong, and all of that, do they almost have to uphold this persona of remaining strong?
Yeah.
Although, as from what you're saying, from your experiences, some of these women are crying behind the scenes, right? Because they're isolated, because they, they're still recovering physically, let alone mentally. Maybe it's a shock that they are now a mother, right? And maybe they don't have people to talk about that experience with per se. Would you say some of that contributes? And there's almost that dichotomy where it's like, yes, I'm a strong Black woman, but also I am also strong in my weakness, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that their mothers, or like our mothers, maybe didn't speak to us about things like postpartum depression, and probably did go through it.
Yes.
I'm 100% sure they
Yeah.
did.
Yeah, of course.
But didn't talk to us about it. And so now we're going through it.
Yes.
And it's kind of like we don't have the space to maybe talk about it because it's, again, the whole mental health stigma.
Yeah.
It's like, you have this baby.
Yeah.
Now, like, take care of it.
Yeah.
Or be happy about it.
You're supposed to be happy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, just, you're supposed to be happy. You had
Yep.
a baby. Like, this
Yep.
is what you wanted. Or, like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, take responsibility. Like, all these different things that sort of come with, like, motherhood.
Yeah.
That you're supposed to look like. And then with, like, the age of social media, like,
Of course.
the sort of this picture of what motherhood is supposed to look like, there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of expectation that come with it. And so I don't think there's that space
Yeah.
to have those conversations. So I think that's what we need more of.
Yeah.
And like, more women need more spaces to
have these
real conversations about
Very good.
motherhood, about like Black motherhood. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah.
It's not always like we need to go. Sometimes it's about like slowing down and like saying like, I do need to cry. Or
Yeah,
I need
yeah.
to, like, you know, I need help, or
Yeah.
like, just different things like that.
Yeah.
Or I am going through postpartum depression, and like, it doesn't mean I'm weak. It's just that this is a real thing that
Yeah.
I'm going through.
It's this central theme of, again, lack of support. We're not just talking lack of physical support, but even lack of social support, not just in caring for the child, but even in creating a safe space where Black women throughout the African diaspora, from what you're saying, you know, from continent to the to the Caribbean, even those, I'm going to presume maybe even in Nova Scotia, multi-generational African Canadians, where they don't have that space to feel, if that makes sense. So they always have to be maintaining this strong persona, and how that can detriment their overall mental health. And that leads me to my next piece in terms of what happens to mothers' overall health during pregnancy and after. So you talked about the mental health piece as it relates to postpartum depression and things. What other, maybe even physical health changes occur during pregnancy and even after pregnancy? To mothers.
A lot of things.
A lot of things. I know, right? Yeah.
Like, so, well, I'm not like a doctor or anything, but
Just based on your experience, from what you've seen.
What I've myself been trying to learn, and just from hearing other women's experiences,
Yes.
like, your body is getting ready for a human.
Yeah.
And so, like, hormonally,
Yeah.
like, your body is shifting.
Okay.
And so, so you're asking, like, how your health is impacted by it.
Yeah, essentially. Or even just, I mean, you're doing great in terms of just even talking about the changes, because I think there's even maybe some men, like, you know, maybe there's some men or some uncles, or maybe even just women in general, who are anticipating this journey. Maybe they're pregnant. They're not unaware of what changes are going to happen to their overall health.
Oh, okay.
So when you're talking about hormonal changes, when you're talking about your body preparing for a human, that you're on the right. That's exactly it. So,
yeah. Like,
what else?
Hormonal changes, like physical changes.
Mm-hmm.
There's like symptoms that come with pregnancy. Some women might have it. Some women might not have it.
Like what? What are some examples?
Like nausea. I guess morning sickness that could last from like sometimes the first trimester or into the second trimester. Like, it depends on like what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
I think that's why it's important to go to like prenatal appointments and stuff.
Oh, okay. So to try to plan
to check
the
in.
pregnancy. Those prenatal, I'm assuming, would be related to planning. If you plan the pregnancy?
Or like if you want to have a baby, you mean?
Well, yeah, because you're saying prenatal classes. So I'm assuming those are for those who plan. Because you know there's the oops babies, right? They're the oops babies. So would they be able to go to prenatal classes? Or?
Yeah.
Oh, they still get... Okay, well, that's good to know.
So like going to like prenatal classes, I think you could go at any time.
Oh, anytime. Just to... That's because that's just preparing.
To prepare.
Nice. Okay.
Just to understand what's happening with your health, because there's different things that you have to do, like if there's medical history, with like family history, depends on what age you're having a baby. Like there's
True.
all these different things
True.
To take care of your health. Like you should be eating right, like exercising, like continue to exercise. Everything that you're normally doing for your body, do for your body.
Yep.
So I would say, your body is going to change.
Yeah.
And just like physically, because like I remember reading that like because you're getting ready for your baby to develop, like the amount of blood you start to circulate like doubles or something.
Oh wow. Okay.
Just so that the blood supply can like that's why you like start to have like you get swollen and like your veins like get bigger and stuff
Wow.
like that.
Because you're making double the supply for you and the baby.
For the baby.
Can you imagine?
And so like things like that, I was reading, I was like, oh my gosh.
And meanwhile, you got some men still trying to dictate whether a woman should give birth, whether she should abort, whether she shouldn't. Meanwhile, these women are like, have you ever experienced pregnancy? You don't have any say in what I do. You know what I mean? Again, that's a whole nother conversation.
Physical change.
It is a big physical change. And we as men will never be able to even fathom whether, like my wife went through it twice, where she, had both of our kids. And I saw just certainly the mental changes, but even the physical changes that just when you thought you seeing it all, you're like, oh my gosh, no, I can't. I can't even fathom that that's actually happened. I didn't know that was a thing. So no, what you're saying is great, and I think the viewers and listeners are really going to benefit. But I want to get even more into or I want to start concluding now in terms of just helping the viewers and the listeners to understand how do we, because you talked about really the big issues, the lack of representation and especially the lack of support, where Black women unfortunately they're not feeling supported in their community, because community members should be rallying around them to help support them in that perinatal and I guess postpartum period, so they don't have to do things by themselves, as well as they want to feel supported by their health practitioners, ones who understand their culture, ones who listen to their demands, right? This is what has contributed to some of these disparities. How do we rectify this issue, do you think, of Black women experiencing these disparities and challenges when giving birth and during pregnancy? And then there's another piece. What tips would you provide to mothers who are planning to have children or are pregnant regarding striving to have a healthy pregnancy? So anything you want.
It's like a two-parter.
It's a two-parter. I know. Look at me. I just threw it. So the first one is, how do we rectify this issue? How do we stop our Black women from dying during childbirth or giving birth to unhealthy babies because of stress, because I mean, if you're lacking support, that's going to lead to stress, things along those lines. How do we rectify the issue? What do you think needs to happen, in your opinion? Even baby steps. Like, what do you think are some of the first things that needs to happen?
I think it's creating more spaces for Black women to feel like they are heard and supported. Mm-hmm. If it is like creating more programs where, if it is like maybe it is within their own family that they don't feel that support, that they can go to a program where they know that they will feel that support, because that can go a long way with their mental and emotional health in a pregnancy. So
some like Black maternal support health programs.
Yeah, like more of those is more accessible.
Okay, nice.
I would say. And then, just more representation.
Yeah.
Because I think it definitely goes a long way when Black women feel represented in like health spaces.
Yeah, so if they see like a Black OBGYN or have a Black midwife, who is Congolese, who is Nigerian, who is Jamaican, whichever, they can understand. You're saying that representation goes far beyond just a Black face, but even you're talking somebody who understands the culture, someone who understands the language, all of that.
Even that. I'm Black and that person is Black. I'm just trying to be like empathetic to their experience, and I think that's what helps. And
that's true.
That might be the thing that like
helps save them.
Helps, and I feel like that could go a long way if there's more representation in like hospitals. Because I feel like there have I've heard experiences where like, you know, Black doctors have stepped in or Black nurses have stepped in
Wow.
to help Black families
Yeah.
because something was going on that wasn't right.
And it's made the difference.
Yeah,
you're
it's made
saying.
such a big difference.
Wow.
So I feel like that's like another way
Yeah.
that can help Black women, Black parents, Black families during this this very, I would say like it's a vulnerable stage because
It
like,
is.
you know,
You're responsible for 2 lives.
yeah,
Right.
and so
sometimes 3.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
depending on how
Yeah. I was about to say
many-
maybe 4. There's some triplet stories, right? But it's true.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna even add in this piece, and then we can wrap up. Just you can even throw like 2-3 tips in terms
yes,
of what
the
you would,
tips.
what you would help, you know, a Black woman who's currently pregnant right now or planning to become pregnant. But just your thoughts quickly, like even 30 seconds. Do you think that Black people, even Black women specifically, need like a Black maternal health clinic? So like they have a women's college, for instance, which we know was created essentially for white women, right? We know, right? If you look at the history of women's college, it was essentially created for white women, right? Because naturally, you know, white women wanted to feel supported during their pregnancy, etc. Do you think we need something similar for Black women, just like Indigenous women, for instance, are advocating for things specific for Indigenous mothers? Do you think Black women need a clinic where you would, I guess, be able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone in terms of having the representation naturally and the support? Do you think that would be something we should look into, that research should look into?
That would be amazing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there we go.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if we look at the stats in the U.S., we don't have any stats here, so we have to look to our neighbors.
To our neighbors. But then you have the anecdotes, you have the
Yeah,
stories,
yeah.
which almost are very similar
Yeah.
to that in the States. Maybe, of course.
But like they have
Yeah.
the numbers, and we're always talking about numbers.
I know, right? No, you're right. No, you're right. It's a very good point. If, you know, they're looking at the hard data, as they would say, right? I mean, that's, but anyway, no, it's true. But, you know, it's something that I've thought about, something that my wife has thought about, and I'm happy it's something that that you even think, and based off of your work, again, I've just done this based off of anecdotes from other Black mothers that I've known. You've worked with them, right? So the fact that you're saying it, I think carries some weight. Couple tips before we wrap up that you would give some mothers, some Black mothers to think about, or that should do. Or expecting mothers, I should say, even those who are planning or even in the process of getting pregnant.
I guess for those who are planning, tips I would give would be, I guess, just to educate yourself in terms of like what resources are out there, whether it's in like your community, in terms of like what supports you can get, and then how to educate yourself in terms of like childbirth education.
Very good. Okay.
Because once you go to the hospital, it gets like, depending on where you give birth, whether it's a hospital at home or the birthing center, things go fairly quickly from like what I've heard. Yeah. And it goes, and sometimes you don't have the voice to advocate. Yeah. But if you have the information, you can plan ahead to have the right people to support you, whether it's a doula or a support person, or if you are, you know, do have a partner, it's your partner, and you equip them with the information too.
Very good. Okay.
So I would highly recommend that everybody, you know, do that work. Do a child education course, or like a prenatal class. Yeah. And then knowing where your support is, childbirth education course, and then just thinking about like financially as well, like if this is before you're having a child, like thinking financially, like what is that going to look like? Because I think that's where it gets really hard, is of course financially. And then your overall mental health, like are you in the space to do this right now? Like if that's something that is hard right now, then take care of yourself mentally first. Because having a child does trigger a lot. When you become a parent, it might trigger when you were parented. And so like
that's a good
all those
point.
different things come up, and you're like, okay, now I have a little one, and I'm thinking about when I was a little kid, and like so it does bring up some stuff, and I think that's also where the postpartum comes in as well. So I guess looking at it in a holistic lens of how you want to sort of go about having your if you decide to have a child, like sort of think about your choices and the decisions, and so if it's whether you're doing that by yourself or with a partner, like think about it together, or if it's by yourself, think about who your community will be.
Very good.
And the same thing with somebody who's already expecting.
All right.
Yeah.
Princilia, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. I think those are very solid tips. I think you gave us some really rich information in terms of your experiences. I think you even did justice in being the voice for a lot of these Black women who, as you said, have felt unheard and have felt invisible and neglected, as the article said. So continue doing what you're doing. You're doing phenomenal work. I mean, this is something that the fact that you have a passion for just goes to show. I can only imagine the great work that you're doing with these mothers, and probably how grateful they are to have you. Right? So thank you. No, you're very welcome. Thank you for coming on this podcast. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This was the episode on Black maternal health. And we had Princilia Babwa, Master of Social Work, perinatal social worker, who gave us a very rich overview of some of the experiences of Black mothers who are in the process of giving birth or who have given birth. And, you know, how to help them and how to help our community to help rally around the givers of life, the first people on this planet who helped birth nations, right? The first person on this planet was an African woman. So we have to, of course, help nurture her children, her female children. So thank you for tuning in. This is Rebuilding the Black Family podcast, and we will see you next time. All right. Like, subscribe, share, please, and thank you. Peace.